intro level classes. And so it's really intro level classes. You'll learn Java, C++, software design, basic data structures and programming practices. The first CS class at U of I is basically the same thing as AP CS. So if you've taken that class, you're already kind of ahead, and that class should be pretty easy for you. And freshman year, your lectures are pretty big. They're like 200 to 400 students, and you'll have a weekly lab or discussion that has about 20 students, and it's led by a TA. So that's kind of where you'll get more personalized, I guess, instruction. And then in lectures, you'll just get like general information. It takes a bit of getting used to, but I feel like the adjustment's pretty easy. And then sophomore and junior year, you'll get more in-depth classes. They're still really structured, so you'll still follow a curriculum. And you'll learn more about computer architecture and systems. So you'll start to get more lower level. And you'll start to take your electives like databases, if you're interested in ML or AI or bioinformatics, things like that. So towards junior year, you'll start to take some electives, and your classes will get less structured. So you'll get to kind of figure out what you want your schedule to look like and what classes that you want to take. And then senior year, you'll be finishing up any required classes that you have left, but it'll be mostly elective courses. So just things that you're interested in. And then at University of Illinois, a lot of students will take up research or part-time internships their senior year because your schedule will be less full, so you'll have time to do that as well. And so to go into a little bit more of what classes are actually like I said, they tend to be on the larger side. And the assignments in each of these classes are mostly individual, or sometimes they'll be partner. But there's a couple of group projects and homeworks that are 3 to 4 people. In your curriculum, you're required to do one group project class. So in that class, it'll be a group of 4 people, but that's only one class. The rest of them are individual or partner. And sometimes you'll have like group homeworks. In programming heavy classes, you'll do these assignments called machine problems, which we call MPs. And they're your most time consuming assignments. They'll be 1 to 2 weeks long with some sort of programming assignment. And you'll be able to run your code against what they call an auto grader for most of your classes. And that's what they use to check whether or not your code works. And so you'll get about 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the class, to do that. There are theory classes. So you'll have like discrete structures, which is kind of a math class, or algorithms and models of computation. And those will have paper homeworks, and so you'll usually type them up on like a Google Doc and submit those online as well. And then when I started at U of I, this was a newer thing, but it's definitely become more settled, where many classes will have weekly or bi-weekly computer quizzes. So there is a room in the basement of the engineering library where there's just a room of computers, and you will go in once or twice a week, or once or every other week, to go take a computer quiz for your classes. And those are really nice because they allow you to kind of check in your progress as you go, but you also get to schedule your own exams basically. So if you have a really busy like Monday through Wednesday, but the quiz is offered Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you can schedule your quiz to take at any time on Friday. So you have Thursday to study. So you can basically space out your quizzes with your homework and kind of schedule it on your own as you go. So that's one nice thing. We call it the CBTF, computer-based testing facility. And so that's the one nice thing about the CBTF. And if you prefer to do like weekly check-ins versus midterms, a lot of classes are making their midterms a smaller percentage of your grade and allowing you to take these weekly computer quizzes instead. So that's a little bit about what the classes are like. And then I'll talk a little bit about the difference between CS engineering and CS plus X. Technically, CS plus X does not include CS plus math, but CS plus statistics, but they're pretty similar with degree requirements of CS plus X. But CS plus engineering requires calculus-based physics. You'll take 2 semesters of that unless you test out of it with AP Physics C. And then you'll also have to take Calc 3 and linear algebra. And CS engineering has more required CS electives. So you'll have to take 6 tech electives in computer science for CS engineering. But for CS plus X, you get to specialize in an additional field like linguistics, which can really help you with NLP if that's something you're interested in, crop sciences, economics, anthropology, all kinds of cool things like that. And that's in the School of Liberal Arts and Sciences. But at the base of the major, they have the same core classes. You'll get the same knowledge and you'll get the same job and internship opportunities. It's just that if you're interested in like an additional field, like you're really interested in where CS and music come together, it's a really cool opportunity to kind of do both. So you'll take all the core CS based classes, but then the other half of your schedule will be filled with your plus X. So if you're really interested in just CS engineering might be a better fit, just because you'll have more space in your schedule to take more CS tech electives. But I know friends who have done CS plus X and been interested in their plus X, but really wanted to focus on their CS curriculum, and that's worked out fine for them as well. And so to talk, yeah.
Real quick, is there any disadvantage to signing up for a CS plus X? I know some students were concerned that if they put down CS as their major and they did not get in, I think someone told me that you couldn't put CS as your first choice and a CS plus X as your second choice. Is that true?
I'm not sure because I didn't apply a CS plus X, but that might be true for the application, just because I think they might not want you to apply for your first and second to just be CS. And so that might be why for your first and second choice to just be computer science. Maybe that's why they don't let you do that. For CS plus X, I guess disadvantages I would say would be that if you're not super interested in your plus X, you will be taking like 40 to 50% of your classes, your electives will be the X classes. And so that, I guess, if depending on whether or not you're super interested in your plus X, I guess that would potentially be one. The other thing is that CS engineering students get priority registration for CS tech electives, not the core based classes. Everyone is the same for that, for the required classes, but for tech electives, I know CS engineering students get a little bit, like a couple days ahead for their registration than CS plus X students do, but I have friends in CS plus X that were able to get into all the classes they wanted to get into. So in the end, it didn't really matter. But I guess that's like a textbook definition, like textbook disadvantage, but it doesn't really affect people like in reality. I don't know if that fully answered the question, but those would be the two that I've seen.
Okay, thank you.
And so in CS engineering, there's not necessarily a concentration, but you do need to take 3 electives in one area of focus is what they call it. And so I kind of listed the areas of focus here. There's a lot of overlap between them and some are more popular than others. So for example, like intelligence and big data has a lot of classes that fall under it. So does human and social impact, but algorithms and models of computation is a little bit less popular. It has fewer classes under it just because it is super hard. And so there are a lot of electives that you can take, and it's pretty easy to find 3 that fall under something that you're interested in. So there was a question about how to pick which area of focus to choose. And I think you kind of figure it out as you take classes in the core curriculum. So for example, there's a class called CS 374, which I took junior year, and it is algorithms and models of computation. It's one of that type of class. And it was super hard for me. So I was like, okay, maybe that's not where my strengths are. Maybe that's not where I want to focus. And there are other classes that you'll take that are required, like systems programming, which kind of relates a little bit more to like the distributed systems networking type of class. And so I was like, okay, like that's something that's kind of interesting to me. Maybe that'll be what I want to do. And then you'll be in internships and looking at different career opportunities throughout your college experience, going to job fairs and things like that. And you'll kind of see what kind of things that recruiters are looking for as well. And so you can maybe pick your area of focus depending on where you want to go in your career. So I ended up doing my area of focus in intelligence and big data, just because that's where the classes that I was interested were in. And that's also what I saw recruiters really looking for. But I was also really close to getting my area of focus in distributed systems, networking, and security, because all the classes in that section were really interesting and really cool. And so it really just depends. It'll come naturally, I think, as you go through the curriculum, because a lot of the core classes fall into kind of categories like this. And then I also highly recommend talking to upperclassmen once you are trying to choose classes, because they'll have recommendations. So you might think like class sounds really, really cool, but sometimes you'll talk to an upperclassman and they'll be like, oh, it wasn't super useful. It's really similar to this class. If you've already taken this class, that might not be really helpful. So I think the biggest piece of advice I have is to talk to upperclassmen and see what they recommend for classes. There was a security class that I had no idea about, never would have taken. But one of the upperclassmen said, hey, I don't know if you know anything about security, but this class was so much fun. It's really hard, but it was really cool. I learned a lot, and it was just like one of the best classes I've taken at U of I. And so I took it, and now I recommend it to everyone. So I definitely would talk to people that are older than you and see kind of what they've seen in their experience. And I think those would be the three guiding things that I would take into consideration when you're trying to decide your area of focus. There are two other parts, I guess, of going to college, which would be your extracurriculars and your side projects. I would say neither are required, but they both kind of boost you a little bit. So extracurricular wise, there's like engineering related organizations you could do. So I was an engineering council, like I said. There's also outreach organizations we can go and help like middle schoolers and high schoolers with STEM. There's honor societies, professional engineering fraternities and organizations. If you're interested in CS specific organizations, there's plenty of those. And another popular thing is non-engineering related organizations. So professional business fraternities are really popular, consulting organizations where you can kind of merge business and tech together. And then with side projects, this is something that you can work on outside of your classwork. You can work on them with friends, other students, kind of create a little group. Some common side projects, so you can create a web app, game, or mobile application. And this is a good way to add to your resume experiences and show companies what your interests are outside of your classwork and what you're building expertise in. But this is in no way like required to get a job or an internship. I didn't do any side projects in college, mostly because I was really heavily involved in my extracurriculars. That's what I wanted my focus to be. And so I wouldn't say either of these are required, but they definitely boost just the experience that you have, whether it's leadership and professional experience or technical experience. And those are both really valuable. So with internships and jobs at University of Illinois, we have career fairs and recruiting events at the beginning of every semester. And so for our fall fair, when it was in person, we had about 500 companies come, and this is the engineering career fair, so they're recruiting all engineering majors. But we had over 500 companies come. In the spring, it was about half. So they're really, really big career fairs. And then apart from the career fair, companies will also come and have recruiting events and tech talks where they'll come, meet students, collect resumes. It's a really good networking opportunity. And at the career fair, sometimes they'll even give you an interview right there on the spot for the next day. Because at U of I, we have interview rooms in the engineering career services area. So companies can book rooms and literally host interviews, first round interviews right there at the fair, which is pretty cool. So speaking of interviews, they're mostly technical interviews for computer science, meaning that you'll go into a room, there'll be one or two engineers, they'll give you some sort of coding problem and you whiteboard them. So you'll like stand there at a whiteboard and pseudocode or code out a solution to the problem that they're giving you, but you don't really need to worry about that until sophomore and junior year. So if you're applying for freshman year internships, they'll probably be very simple and behavioral. Some companies that hire freshmen for internships, if anyone is curious, State Farm, John Deere, Microsoft has a special program, Google has a special program. A lot of the big tech companies will have special freshman year internship programs that are really cool. This was my, I think, biggest regret in college is that I didn't think I could get one of the big freshman internships. So I didn't even apply. But one of my friends, he got an Microsoft internship freshman year and just kept taking his return offer, and now he works there full time. So it's a really good opportunity to kind of get your foot in the door. And if you really like the company, then you have an in to one of the biggest tech companies in the country. So that's pretty exciting. And then the other thing that I feel like people don't talk about enough is internships around campus. And so at U of I, we have Research Park. At Research Park, there is Yahoo, Synchrony Financial, John Deere, State Farm, Motorola, NVIDIA. Its only office in Illinois is in Champaign in Research Park. And so like there's Research Triangle near the Triangle, which is Duke, UNC, North Carolina State. And so I would definitely look into those kinds of opportunities, which are sometimes a little bit more accessible than like the summer internships, and those you can do during your school year as well. So if you're like a sophomore, junior, or senior, that's something to look into. And then joining orgs that have strong alumni connections can be useful for referrals. So if you're in a club that has a really good alumni network, sometimes they'll post and be like, hey, does anyone want a referral for Microsoft? Does anyone want a referral for Google? And you can just set up coffee chats with people who have experience in those companies to kind of see what their experience was like and things like that, and build your network so you can have access to more job opportunities in that way too. So that's it for my prepared talk, but I'm open to questions if anyone has any.
All right, so what kinds of questions do we have? Any takers? Yep.
How did you know you wanted to go into CS?
Hold on a sec.
How did you know you wanted to go into CS?
I didn't really fully know, to be honest. I knew it was something that I enjoyed doing just from my couple months of experience at that point. I was filling out my college apps like literally 2 months after I'd started APCS. So it was definitely not something I was sure about. It was actually something I accidentally landed into a little bit because when I was filling out my application, I thought that I wanted to do business, but I knew I was interested in computer science because I was having fun in the class. And so I tried to make business my first choice and computer science my second choice on the application, and it wouldn't let me. It said that if I was going to apply computer science, it had to be my first choice. So I said, okay. And I made it my first choice, and I was really apprehensive going into the program. I was really scared. I was like, I don't have any experience compared to probably everyone else at this school that's like going into computer science. And so it was like really scary. And I was prepared probably to transfer at some point. And then I kind of just kept getting through classes and I kept enjoying it. And so there was a point in junior year where I was like, I guess I'm doing this. And I'm not transferring out. So I think it was mostly an experience thing as I went along, but I knew that I was really enjoying the class that I was in. I was mostly scared that I wouldn't be able to do it. So I feel like going through the program was a confidence boost, being like, yeah, you can do it. You're getting through all these classes. But I think I knew because I enjoyed like the fundamentals of it. And I think that was always there. Like when I was younger, I used to do all these logic puzzles. And so when I was in computer science, I was like, this is adult logic puzzles. That's what it felt like to me. So I think I really liked the thought process that went behind solving CS problems. And so I think that's how I knew that's something that I wanted to keep doing that I didn't find anywhere else in my curriculum, I guess.
You only took like one CS class. So if to get into UIUC, what do you think they focus like heavily on? Like GPA, SAT, ACT, extracurriculars, etc.
It's hard for me to answer that question because I'm not in the admissions, so there's not really like a set answer. But from what I've seen in my experience, I think I can speak for myself. I had really strong extracurriculars at Friend. My GPA was pretty good, and I think also like when in my essays, I focused on what the fundamentals, like the building blocks of computer science that made me really interested in computer science were. So I think more than just talking about CS experience, for me, I talked about, because I didn't have that, I talked more about why computer science was something that interested me. So I went back to like what computer science like building blocks are and why those things are interesting to me and why I like doing those things and how that builds up into a liking for computer science. So that's my personal experience with my essays and stuff like that. But I think in general, all of those things are really important to building a well-rounded college application. And I think if you have more CS background and CS experience, that's something that they definitely want to see. And so that's something that you can focus on. Like my brother, for example, had a ton of experience. So he focused on building up that in his essays. And because I lacked that, I kind of stripped CS down to like bare bones and focused on that.
How are the job opportunities like leaving U of I? And do you think you could have gotten that if you went to like a lesser college?
I think job opportunities at U of I are amazing, mostly because we have the largest career fair in the country, student-run career fair in the country. So like every company you could possibly think of will be at U of I recruiting its students. And what I like about the career fairs at U of I is that when companies come, it's very intentional, and they're there because they want to recruit University of Illinois students. Because it's not accessible, like the campus is not accessible. Like you have to really try to get to U of I. You're not going to end up there by accident. So companies are flying from all over the country and then driving 3 hours to the middle of Illinois. So it's very intentional. They're there because they want University of Illinois students. So that's something that I didn't know about U of I before I went there. I didn't know how big the career fair was. I didn't even realize how big the career fair was until I ran it. But it's huge and it's a really, really good opportunity. That being said, I don't think that going anywhere else would affect I don't think if you went anywhere else, it would be like, you're not going to get this job. I think U of I just makes it a little bit easier by bringing those people to you, but there's 100 ways of getting your job. I actually didn't get my job through University of Illinois Career Fair. I just applied online because the line for NVIDIA was too long. And I didn't want to wait in that line at the career fair. And so it doesn't really have, my experience I wasn't connected to University of Illinois career resources at all. I just kind of applied online and I heard back. So I think that experience would go for anyone. And while I was at NVIDIA, I met people from all schools. So I don't think there's any like better or worse schools, especially for something that's STEM related, especially computer science. Like the content of computer science that I learned in APCS at FREMD is the same content that I learned in my first CS class at University of Illinois. So I think when it comes to computer science, the fundamentals are going to be the same regardless of where you go. And that's what's important, is a solid understanding of like data structures and things like that. That's what'll help you in your interviews. So once you get the interview, it doesn't matter where you go, it matters what you've learned. And that content, I personally feel, is the same regardless of like what school you go to.
So what would you feel is something that you gain the most from your different professional opportunities? Like if somebody wanted to kind of find a mixture of like extracurriculars and then also coding experiences, what would you say would be like the best extracurricular out of the ones that you listed for like what you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I think if you're looking for more specialized coding experience, I think Association of Computing Machinery, ACM, is a really cool opportunity. It's like a national organization. It's not just for college students. So after you graduate, you can still be part of ACM, and they have these things called special interest groups that they call SIGs. And there's so many different type of SIGs. There's like a music related one, there's like an AI ML one, there's infrastructure related ones. So it's this really, really big national organization that you can get involved with in college. And they work on CS projects as part of their as part of their club, and they have different networking events with companies that they will host. In addition to working on those side projects, there's also leadership opportunities if you're interested in that, to kind of lead a special interest group and work up through their executive leadership type of thing as well. So if you're interested in balancing both like the technical part as well as getting some professional and leadership experience, I think a club like ACM would be really cool to be a part of. Or like Women in Computer Science is very similar. They'll also work on, there's like a technical committee in Women in Computer Science. We can work on their side projects and present them at Engineering Open House, which is this really large event that they have. And then also gain professional experience because they have different networking events, and then also gain leadership experience by becoming like the leader of that committee or something like that.
Why don't you tell us about your job right now, like what you did for your internships and then what you're doing in your job and how that process went?
Yeah. So I, like I said, had no computer science background really going into it. So I also didn't really know what kind of jobs and internships were out there. So I kind of wanted to try a bunch of things. So that's exactly what I did. After my freshman year, I like last minute got an internship at a really small startup in Chicago. And they were a healthcare startup. And so that was my first little soiree into my internships. I worked on a team of like 3 developers. It was a really brand new startup. And so that was a really cool experience in the healthcare industry. So I got a little feel for what that industry is like a little bit, as well as what working at a really small early stage startup is like. And then my sophomore year, I was like, okay, let's try something a little bit more structured with an internship program, something a little bit bigger. So I worked for a fintech company in Chicago as well. And that was a really cool experience. But it was definitely like a smaller company, definitely bigger than the first one, but a smaller company in general. I think it had between like 250 to 500 employees total, like globally. But I really liked the company. I just wasn't sure if fintech was necessarily the industry that I wanted to be in or felt passionately about. So then my junior year, after my junior year, I thought I would go for one of like the bigger tech companies or try to get one of the bigger tech companies. So I interned at NVIDIA my junior year on the same team that I'm on now. And it was really cool to be working at such a big company, especially early on. There were so many people for me to learn from. And NVIDIA is really cool because it has a really flat structure. So you can talk to anyone and everyone's really willing to talk to you. So by the end of my internship, I had spoken to 2 vice presidents who like knew me by name because I just set up coffee chats with them, and everyone's really super nice about it. Like one of the internship events is that you go to the CEO's house, like a little party. So that's pretty fun. But in terms of the work I did, I am on an internal team. So I develop software tools for the hardware teams that build out the chips. And I think that was a really good fit for me for my first job, because I've been learning a lot, and because it's an internal tools team, everything changes really quickly. So after one project, the next project I get to do is completely different than the one I just completed, because it's a completely new tool that I'm building for a completely different team. So for me, I wanted to learn more. I was like, I don't really know where I fit in this industry. I don't really know what I want to be doing or like what kind of projects I want to be building out. And so for me, this was a really good fit for my first job because I get to kind of test out a bunch of different projects. I've worked on like data pipelines, I've worked front end. Right now I'm building out like an infrastructure back end. My next project is going to be ML based. So I've kind of figured out what I like in computer science in the industry and what I don't like as much in the industry. So I think for me, that was like a really, really good fit first job. But that's kind of what my job is looking like now. My job is also a little bit unique because I'm not a software engineer, I'm a software architect. And so what that means is that hardware teams will be like, hey, we are having this problem with our development process, or we're having this blocker, which is slowing down our processes. So we're doing all of this stuff manually. Is there a way that we can figure out how to make it faster or better or automate it? And so as an architect, I work with one of my coworkers and we kind of construct solutions. And so we'll research the technology, we'll research what frameworks exist, and we'll kind of propose a solution. We'll say, hey, like there's this idea that we have using these technologies and these frameworks. What do you think about that? And so we'll go through this building process. And then we get to build out the solution. So that's where like the software engineering part comes in, where I'm actually coding it. And then it's a lot of back and forth between the customer and me. And so it's really cool because I get to act both as a software engineer as well as kind of the project manager and the product manager for my own tool and what I'm building out. And that was also something that was pretty unique to my job and important to me because, like I said, it's a little bit hard to know what different jobs look like real jobs, what they actually do besides a title. Like I feel like we hear a lot of titles and you'll hear a lot of titles when you're in college, but I was so confused. I was like, I don't know what these jobs are. I don't know what they're doing. And so this job kind of gives me the experience and being like, okay, like when I'm planning out solutions, I'm being an architect. When I'm deciding my timeline and keeping up with my timeline, checking in on myself and doing that kind of thing and reporting that to the customers, I'm being a project manager. When I'm determining the features for my tool and determining what's feasible and what's not feasible, and deciding what's important and not important, I'm being a project manager. When I'm coding it all out, I'm being more of the engineer. So I think for me, it was also really cool to be able to figure out what kind of roles I liked when I was taking them on. And that helped me figure out kind of what I want to do in the future. So that's kind of a little bit about my job currently.
Wonderful. We have another follow-up question.
What type of projects did you do in high school to get into U of I, and what type of projects did you do in college after you got in?
So to
What
get
kind of projects?
into
Coding projects or? He's referring to coding projects, but one of the things that she said was that Java was her only coding class in high school. So you said you didn't do external projects really in college, right? It was more of the extracurriculars.
Yeah, because in your classes, you will do a ton of projects. So like in my classes, we built out a web application, we built out a mobile application. In class, we did like a bunch of like cool like programming assignments that people use as side projects on their resume. I love computer science, but it was never going to be something that I did all day. So in my classes, I would do my computer science, my technical things, and then outside of that, I really liked doing other things. So for me, it was really important that I really like leading events. That's just something I did in high school. It's something that I wanted to continue in college. So I focused on like the networking side of it because I was the director for the engineering career fair. So I worked the engineering career fair for 2 years, and then I became the director of it. So that's mainly where my time was focused. I was also in a professional engineering fraternity. So I got to meet a lot of computer science and engineering students there. But I wasn't really involved in like the technical side of it extracurricularly apart from my classes, because I felt like I got enough technical experience from my classes. And I figured out what my interests were through my internships and my electives. And I didn't really want to do any side projects simply because I just needed to do something else other than computer science for a little bit of my day.
Fair. All right, we have one more question.
How is the workload at U of I? Like outside of your extracurriculars, like just for the classes?
Yeah, I think your freshman year, you'll be in class a lot more. So you'll have, I think, less time to do your homework sometimes just because you'll be in class kind of all day. But I think the workload, it really depends on the class. And this is something that the reason that I would recommend talking to upperclassmen when you decide what classes to take, especially junior and senior year. Freshman and sophomore year, your schedule is kind of set. And so the workload is pretty balanced because they make it balanced for your freshman and sophomore year. If you're worried about the workload, I would just take the classes in the skeleton that they give you and not try to jump ahead too much, because that's when the workload gets unmanageable. Like there's a reason they have these classes in certain semesters, and they've spaced it out a certain way. So it's a very, very manageable workload. They'll balance out the theory classes and the programming classes for you. But I think junior and senior year is when it gets a little bit iffy because some of the electives are super easy, some of the electives are super hard. And so that's when talking to upperclassmen is super valuable because that's when you can kind of see what kind of things that they would recommend based on their experiences and their friends' experiences. Because some of the electives are like the hardest class, like equivalent to the hardest core classes workloads, but they're not really advertised that way. So there's no way to really tell unless you talk to upperclassmen, but the workload really depends on the class that you're taking. So for example, the first CS class I thought was really manageable because it was really similar to APCS in high school. So I was like, this is a breeze. And then data structures was, I thought they gave you plenty of time to work on your machine problems, which are your programming assignments. They gave you 2 weeks. I was like, as long as you started early, and they incentivized it too. They give you a ton of extra credit if you finish it early or start early. And so I would start early and I thought it was really manageable. So as long as you stay on top of your work and stay on top of the deadlines and start early, I think it's pretty manageable and you'll have way more time than you did in high school. That's what I realized is when you don't have to wake up at 6 a.m. and you don't come home at like 5 p.m. and you have like 3 hours to do your homework, everything seems a lot more manageable, especially junior and senior year. I had
Our bell
no
just
classes.
rang.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much, Vibha. This was wonderful. We really appreciate you coming and talking to us. And I will let you, they can all wave goodbye to you on their way out.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much.